The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 teachers in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with the Tennessee academic standards. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu. This video is aligned with the following Tennessee academic standards.
Well, welcome everybody. This is actually an intro to History Day. So this is our contact info. It's also in the packets that we gave to you. We should be fairly easy to contact. I work for the Tennessee Historical Society, which has been around since 1849. We do public programming for adults as well. History Day is our largest public outreach program. We were founded in 1849, and if you ever go to the Tennessee State Museum or the Tennessee State Library and Archives, all the cool stuff that's there belongs to us, but we don't have to take care of it. Our lovely colleagues at the State Museum and State Archives do that for us. I'm also the Director of Membership and Programs, so you will see in your packet a membership offer for teachers for $25. One of the benefits of membership is a subscription to the Tennessee Historical Quarterly. So I want you all to know that the Tennessee Historical Society is kind of the parent organization of Tennessee History Day. I was having lunch with a teacher last month and he said, I got my renewal notice for the Tennessee Historical Quarterly, and I looked at it and I said, Jennifer Core, is that the same Jennifer Core? It is in fact the same Jennifer Core who does both of these jobs, okay? But about 80% of my time is spent on History Day. So why do History Day? What is History Day? History Day is actually doing history. I can't tell you how many students I have come up to me and they say, Ms. Core, I love History Day, but I still hate history. History Day is doing an in-depth research project and presenting it to a larger audience. Now that larger audience can be the school itself. It can be a regional contest. It can be the state contest. But what we want the students to do is to really get in and wrestle with primary sources and interpreting them. All right, so we're going to look at a documentary that was done by a middle school student at a public school. This documentary placed well enough at the regional contest to advance to the state contest, and then at the state contest it was kind of middling. So if we have 12 documentaries, this was somewhere 6th, 7th, or 8th. I'm showing this to you because I want you to see that not all students have to do great things right out of the gate. You can do something that is just completely satisfactory, okay? You can do something that's a B and still learn. So in a classroom setting, this documentary might have been a B+ or an A-. It did, because it was in a less competitive district, it did qualify to come to the state contest, but then at the state level, it was not good enough to medal at the state. Okay, there's some good things about this documentary. There's some things that might annoy you about this documentary, especially if you've seen it a whole bunch of times like I have. The theme this year was leadership and legacy. So we'll take a look at Andrew Jackson, the People's President.
Andrew Jackson, the People's President. It is to be regretted that the rich and powerful too often bend the acts of government for their selfish purposes. Andrew Jackson, 1832. Andrew Jackson was born on March 15, 1767, to Andrew and Elizabeth Hutchinson Jackson in the Waxhaws region between North and South Carolina. His father died 3 weeks before he was born. He had 2 older brothers, one named Robert and another named Hugh. When Andrew Jackson was 13, his 2 brothers and he joined a local militia. Hugh was killed in the Battle of Stono Ferry. Robert died of smallpox during the Revolutionary War. Then his mother died of cholera. Left an orphan, 14-year-old Andrew was raised by his uncles, When he was old enough to go to college, he was accepted into law school in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Andrew Jackson continued living in Tennessee in his home called the Hermitage. In 1796, after graduating law school, he helped create the Tennessee Constitution. Andrew Jackson ran for president in 1824, but was not elected. When he ran for president again in 1828, he received the majority of electoral college votes. The opponents who ran against him thought of him as a monarch and called him King Andrew I. On the other hand, the people who supported him called him the People's President. Andrew Jackson had a lot of firsts as president. He was the first ever president elected for the Democratic Party, for example. He was also the first and only president to pay off the national debt entirely, and he was the first president from west of the Appalachian Mountains. Andrew Jackson is also the reason for the Democratic Party's symbol, the donkey. People who disliked him called him a jackass. Many people would have been offended by this, but Andrew Jackson, being from an agricultural society, knew that donkeys are reliable and important to farming. So he wanted to keep the name to show he was reliable. When the time came for his inauguration, Andrew Jackson had a topic in his speech that, when put into action, would destroy the Native Americans' lives as they knew it: Indian removal. Only 2 years after his inauguration, he confirmed in a speech to Congress that the Indian Removal Act was progressing in moving natives west of the Mississippi River. It gives me great pleasure to announce to Congress that the benevolent policy of the government, steadily pursued for nearly 30 years in relation to the removal of the Indians beyond the white settlements, is approaching to a happy consummation. 2 important tribes have accepted the provision made for their removal at the last session of Congress, and it is believed that their example will induce remaining tribes also to seek the same obvious advantages. Andrew Jackson, 1830. But natives were not so quick to follow other tribes' examples. When Andrew Jackson got the Cherokees to move west of the Mississippi River, it was not because the tribe wanted to go. Instead, 2 self-appointed Cherokee representatives were the ones to sign the Treaty of New Echota, which traded all land belonging to the Cherokees east of the Mississippi River for $5 million. 16,000 Cherokees who did not agree to this protested, but the treaty was still signed. In the end, 4,000 Cherokee Indians alone died during the journey west of the Mississippi River, not including the other Native American tribes that had to endure the long, hard march west. This is why the path Native Americans had to take is known as the Trail of Tears. Indian removal is not the only thing Andrew Jackson is known for, however. He also participated in many duels. He thought of duels as a resolution to problems with people. In one duel with a man named Charles Dickinson, Andrew Jackson received a bullet to the chest. Even though he had just been shot, he somehow managed to kill Charles. Andrew Jackson also had an unofficial duel with the first governor of Tennessee, John Sevier. During an election for governor of Tennessee, Sevier was running against Andrew Jackson's political friend, Archibald Roane. Jackson and Roane tried to stop people from voting for Sevier by blaming him for corruption. Unfortunately for Jackson, Sevier was still elected governor. Sevier, who was upset about Andrew Jackson's accusations, called Andrew Jackson an adulterer because his wife had not been properly divorced from her previous husband when she married Andrew. Although the 2 men were both extremely angry, and they both fired their guns at each other, neither of them was injured. Including all of his duels, Andrew Jackson was lucky to make it to an old age. So many things that happened to him he barely made out alive. On January 30th, 1835, a mentally unstable man named Richard Lawrence tried to assassinate Andrew Jackson with 2 different guns, but both of them misfired. Andrew Jackson had a lot of enemies, but he also had a lot of loyal supporters whom he promised rewards for supporting him. He did keep his promises. He was awarded government positions to people who were loyal to him, and he fired everyone who hadn't supported him. This came to be known as the spoils system. After his 2-term presidency from 1828 to 1837, Andrew Jackson retired back to the Hermitage. He died in Nashville, Tennessee, at 78 years old. Andrew Jackson's decisions as president resulted in many deaths for Native Americans. He dueled with people he had conflicts with and gave positions in government to those he favored. Supporters of Andrew Jackson's presidency may call him the people's president, and yes, maybe he did support the common people, but his legacy on the country is one of death for many people. Was Andrew Jackson the people's president? Or was he just a man who rewarded his friends and destroyed his enemies?
So there are good things that would jump out to you about this. We could nitpick it for forever, but this is a student who I would allow out of the building with a project, okay?
What grade did you say that student?
Middle school. I don't really remember what grade she was in, but she was a middle school student. So History Day is both a year-long curriculum and a competition cycle. You do not have to participate in the competition portion of it. You can take what you learned here today and use it if you're already doing some sort of skills-based or project-based learning in your classroom. You can just take what we're showing you here today and incorporate it into your existing syllabus. Or you can implement History Day fully and go all out and try to gun all the way for nationals. There is a pretty sharp learning curve your first year of History Day. Amy says, yeah. Jenny says, yes. Tell us about your sharp learning curve, Jenny.
It just never heard me hearing about History Day until I got hired on. I heard there were projects, but not that kids would do it, but like going in and seeing the other projects and just knowing it wasn't up to par to really what was in there. Just they had to really put 110 effort into it.
Yeah, if you want to be competitive.
Yes.
So what Jenny was saying is that it is very eye-opening when you go to a regional contest or a state contest, or if you have students who qualify for National History Day and you're able to go to National History Day. I know the first time I went to National History Day and I walked into the exhibit hall, I said, oh, now I get it. I'm not expecting to take home any medals this year, because there are some kids, the History Day bug is going to bite them, and they are just going to be completely motivated, and they're going to do extraordinary things. And then you're going to have other kids who are just checking off boxes, and they're just doing it as their class project because they've got other things they've got going on. So if you don't participate in the competition part of it this year, I would recommend that you volunteer to serve as a judge at the regional or at the state contest, because that's a really good way of getting your mind around what the expectations are and how to evaluate projects before they leave your building. It is an opportunity for students to learn how to do research, to learn how to do history, rather than just memorizing a list of dates or a list of important characters. They are learning how that particular person or how that particular event shaped history. It is an exploration of any topic in the world and any time period, as long as you go 25 years in the past. We call it Tennessee History Day. Tennessee History Day is the affiliate of National History Day. So National History Day in Tennessee really would be the proper term. And we don't place any restrictions on topics. You can tie the topics. If you're teaching world history, all of your students maybe should be doing world history topics. It is an interdisciplinary program. It does work very well for team teaching with language arts and social studies. It meets a lot of the requirements for both. If you are not your school media specialist or librarian, now's a really good time to make friends with that person, because you're going to need that person's assistance. And History Day is the hands-on portion of your history class. About 5 years ago, National History Day commissioned a study where they looked at 4 school districts across the United States, 2 that were participating in History Day, 1 that was not, and 1 that was in the process of implementing History Day. And you all will not be surprised to learn that according to this study that History Day commissioned on History Day, students who participate in History Day are magically better behaved and smarter and do better on standardized tests, okay? So basically, according to this study, History Day will solve all the problems found within education, even in language arts and technology classes. So if you find yourself in this situation where you have an administration that's reluctant, maybe within the school or within the district itself, this piece of this study that was commissioned can go a ways toward convincing people above you that, hey, this is actually something that we should do, because there are tangible benefits to it. History Day teaches higher order thinking skills. In order to do a successful History Day project, the students must analyze, synthesize, create, and conceptualize. So they're dealing at all those different levels of thinking. They're hitting all of them at some point in the process. Whatever standards are in vogue, History Day fits them because History Day is about learning. It's been around as a national program for around 35 years, so there's lots of resources tying History Day to a particular skill set or to a particular standard. So if you need help doing that, we've got lots and lots of materials on that. I didn't include it with the stuff that I gave you because it's kind of overkill and because the standards keep on changing. So my lovely intern from last summer went through and matched all of our primary sources to all of the standards. We don't have those up because our website is undergoing renovation, but when our website is up, you'll be able to access those under the Educator Resources tab. Okay, so how do students participate? First of all, they do a research project. They actually do the research, and then they decide how they want to present this research to the larger audience. For competition purposes, they're divided into the senior and junior division. So this is high school or middle school. So you might have a 6th grader competing against an 8th grader, but you won't have a 6th grader competing against a 12th grader. Students can do their work individually or in teams of up to 5. Then, if they are interested and if it's something that you want to do, we ask that you have some sort of school contest or some means of selecting who from your school is going to represent you at the regional contest. Our regional contest actually is moving from Austin Peay to Tennessee State University this year. We have one for those of you who are in the Middle Tennessee District at MTSU, and then for East Tennessee, it's at the University of Tennessee Conference Center. Out of the regional districts, and we have 6, we take the top 2 out of each category to come to the state contest. Out of the state contest, we take the top 2 out of each category to go on to the national contest. So the 5 different categories are documentary, exhibit, paper, performance, and website. The paper category is limited to just 1 student. That's not a group project, and it is a traditional academic research paper. Okay, so across the state, we have 7,600 students competing. At the regional contests, of those 7,600, about 1,200 decide that they want to go on in the contest and come to the regional contest. From those, about 275 come to the state contest, and out of those, we take about 65 to National History Day. National History Day itself has over 3,000 kids at it. So we call it National History Day, but it is actually international in scope. There are kids there from Guam, from Singapore, from Hong Kong. And we call it National History Day, and really we shouldn't call it a day because it's a year-round curriculum and competition. We should really call it International History all the time. And that would be a more appropriate name for it. Yes?
Where is?
It's in College Park, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. It's about 45 minutes out of Washington, D.C. All right, every year there is a theme. This is worth 20% on the judging rubric. The theme for next year is conflict and compromise. Okay, so this is what the exhibit hall at National History Day looks like, and you can understand why the first time I walked into it, my eyes got really big, and I said, oh, okay. For exhibits, there are size limitations. All of this is explained in your rule book, and all of the ones here are those trifold boards, but they don't have to be. I've seen round exhibits. I've seen exhibits that look like a little house. I saw an exhibit one year that was a giant book, and you turned the pages of the book. It was about Rachel Carson and Silent Spring. That one was really cool. The little house was about Corrie ten Boom, and you had to get into the house to read the labels. So the ones you see here, as you can see, are quite large, quite colorful, and they have a lot of stuff on them. This was an exhibit that some of our students did on women's fashions from 1880 to 1920. So you can see how History Day can appeal to all sorts of different students. So these girls were not particularly interested in history, but they were interested in fashion. So that's what they did their project on, and they learned a lot from doing it because they looked at primary sources like the Saturday Evening Post and local newspapers. This was one of our students who, she and her partner won a gold medal at the senior group exhibit at National History Day. The theme that year was Revolution, Reaction, something, there were 3 R's, I can never remember. Reform, that's what it was. So she does not have a tri-fold board, she actually has a triangular board, and then her little triangle shirtwaist factory fire model is a triangle as well. And so on the 3 different parts of her board, she starts off with revolution, reaction, and then I think reform would be on this. So she addressed the 3 parts of the theme on the 3 different sections of her board. And this particular project, the little faces here, these are people like the manager of the factory. And so if you can pull that up, and underneath it is a little bio of that person. So it also had that interactive aspect to it as well. This project was interesting. I saw it at the district contest, the regional contest, and I wasn't quite sure what to make of it because it was so incredibly busy. It had so much stuff on it, and all of their labels were handwritten. They were neatly handwritten, but there was a lot of them. They didn't do any work on it between the regional contest and the state contest. They came in second at the regional contest. They came to the state contest, came in second at the state contest. Between the state contest and the national contest, they had a falling out with one another and were no longer speaking, but they did talk about the project long enough to revise it, and they did a lot of work on it between the state contest and the national contest, and they came in first overall in the country for this project.
So you can modify at every level?
Yes, that's an important part of the competition cycle is revision. We want the kids to work on it at each stage, to take the judges' comments into account, or to look at the judges' comments and say, I don't know what this judge is talking about, I don't understand this at all, and to revise. And so I have seen projects, for example, the Andrew Jackson project that we just watched. If she had gotten good comments from the judges, like be more focused or come to an actual conclusion, and she could have totally changed her project around and really improved it. So she probably didn't do a whole lot of work on it between the regional contest and the state contest, because what you saw there is more typical of what we see at the regional contests. Documentary, we saw an example. A documentary is limited to 10 minutes long. It should look like something you see on PBS. It should have a title slide telling us what the title of the documentary is. It should have actual content and a flow to it, narration, music, and then it needs to have an ending slide with the sources that were used or the archives that the student visited. The paper, as I've said before, is a traditional academic paper. Performance. The young lady on the left is Nancy Ward, and the young man on the right, I think, is William Jennings Bryan. For performance, less is more when it comes to props and costumes. There are a lot of tricks to getting a good background. You don't need to have an entire room full of furniture in order to win. I have seen students with very minimal props do very well. Performances are limited to 10 minutes in length. Okay, so here we have some of Tabitha's down there in the corner. And this is the group of 5 students who never got into a fight with one another. They all liked one another.
That's the first time I ever took it. Those guys are sophomores or juniors in college.
Yeah. Wow. So I think that they the first time I saw them, had a lot more props, and then as they went along, they got fewer and fewer props. Because you have to remember that you're probably competing on a college campus. You're not just going to be able to pull up and unload and leave the car there. You're going to have to unload and then maybe carry this stuff through bad weather to another building, okay? So they did theirs on the Civil War. It was 2 sons, one went to fight for the North, one went to fight for the South. And didn't they find a collection of letters from a particular family that they used as part of their script?
Yes, I believe so.
So up here on the right, we have women's suffrage, and you can see that their backdrop, what they did is they built a frame out of PVC piping. They put it on wheels. They took a projector. They projected their scene onto a sheet. They traced it, and then they filled it in with paint. And so they've got several background changes there that they could just let loose like a shade. It's a lot lighter than, painting an entire barnyard scene on wood and hauling that in, which I've seen kids do. Websites, this is good for those kids who are very into tech type stuff, or if you're in a STEM school. Websites must be built in NHD Weebly. This is a platform that levels the playing field for everybody. It's not as fancy as some of the software used to put websites together. This young lady did hers on Dr. Ephraim McDowell, the first doctor to successfully perform a hysterectomy, and the woman lived. And when we went to National History Day, we went to the Hall of Statues, and she said, Miss Core, here's my doctor. And he's from Kentucky, and he's one of the 2 statues that Kentucky chose to put in the Capitol. So that is her standing next to the subject of her website. So how do you actually do this? Some schools and some teachers have been very successful with having a History Day club and doing this as an extracurricular. I will tell you that my teachers who do this, they might start off with 30 kids. They usually end up with about 6 who have completed their projects to the point where they're actually able to bring it to a contest. Doesn't mean that the other kids haven't learned something or haven't done some work toward a project, but they got busy with baseball or basketball or something like that. You can do it with your entire class, or you can start it off in small groups. I had a teacher who came to 9 of these workshops, and after his 9th one, he said, I'm going to do it because I got the kids I'm going to do it with this year. So he had 2 students that he just let loose on History Day, and they ended up having a very successful kind of fairy tale story. They wrote to all of the Tuskegee Airmen, and they got 1 to respond, and this Colonel George Hardy came to their school. He lives in Florida, but he came to Tennessee to visit them because he was so impressed with them. They interviewed him. He did a program for their entire school. They came to the state contest. They won there. They qualified for National History Day. And Colonel Hardy came to National History Day with us. And he met all of our students. And he sat with us at the award ceremony. So stuff like that can happen if you've got the right combination of students, projects, and resources. You can make it a required class project or extra credit, and you can do it in your own classroom or in a team teaching type situation. All right, so if you want to try History Day out and you're not really sure how to go about it, first of all, I would recommend limiting the topics to ones that actually tie into your actual curriculum until you get a better handle of it. You don't need some kid doing Genghis Khan when you're actually doing U.S. history up to the Civil War. You can limit the categories. So if you're more a language arts teacher, or if your background is language arts, maybe all of your students do a paper. Or maybe you're sick of grading papers. Maybe you say you can do anything except a paper. I'm tired of papers. You can limit the group size. A lot of teachers say you can work individually or in pairs, but to manage a group of 5 is difficult. Tabitha says, don't do it. Don't do it.
That one group that was 5, that's the first year I ever did it, and it was a performance and that worked well, but I kind of cut them off at 3.
Yeah. You don't really need 5 people on a website, because as a student, I did not like group projects. As a teacher, I did not like group projects. If you have a group of 4, you have one person who's doing the work, you have one person who's doing nothing, and you have 2 people who are floating along. So you have to learn some strategies for dealing with that. I recommend having them sign a contract with one another, and then also keeping a log where they write down every week, so-and-so wrote the first 3 paragraphs of our script for the documentary. And it doesn't have to be, since you're doing this over a long period of time, I would write something in my syllabus that I reserve the right to give different students in the same group different grades. If you're not doing the work, you're not getting the grade. Also, I would recommend knowing that not all students have to contribute equally every single week in order to get a decent grade. So when it comes to documentaries, for example, I personally think a documentary that is narrated by one person is better than if you have 2 minutes by one kid, 2 minutes by another kid, all the way. All 5 kids don't necessarily need to narrate the documentary in order for it to be a good documentary. Pick the kid with the best speaking voice and who doesn't rush through the entire thing to do it. And again, also making the contest portion of it optional. We have websites for you to look at, TennesseeHistory.org. Our website is currently undergoing renovation. It should be live with resources for you by the 1st of August. And then National History Day is NHD.org. They redid their website last year and I think made it more complicated to use. I just always search. I just go to the search button and put in what I'm trying to find. So I will say there are a lot of resources out there. Pretty much every situation you can find yourself in, somebody has already been in that situation and already created materials to help you. So if you're on some weird, crazy schedule where you see your students every other day for 12 minutes, somebody's written a syllabus for that, I promise you. So you could also look at Minnesota History Day has a lot of really good curriculum stuff on their site, and National History Day in California has a lot of good stuff on their website. So if you get to a point where you're like, my students are not understanding how to write a thesis, just send me an email because I've got at least 5 handouts on how to write an effective thesis. Okay, so all students must participate in a regional contest before coming to the state contest. Every year around April 1st, I get a call from somebody who says, I'm trying to register for the state contest and I'm bringing 60 kids, and it's somebody I've never heard of before. You cannot do that. You have to come up through the ranks. It's just like a track meet. If you're number 1 and number 2 in the county track meet, then you get to go to the state track meet. All right, same with History Day. You are limited to the number of entries you can bring. This varies district to district, but generally it's either 2 or 3 in each category. That actually works out to 60 to 75 kids per division. So Tabitha, for example, is in the middle school. If she had some high school students who went on to the high school and they couldn't find a teacher there to sponsor them, Tabitha could sponsor them. It doesn't count against her total. She can sponsor up to 75 high school students as well as 75 middle school students. And that would be 2 busloads full of kids. That would be a lot. Online registration is required from each teacher, and then the entries. So the students register together if they're working in a group. So our contests are held across the state in Greenville, Knoxville, Cleveland, Nashville, Murfreesboro, and Memphis. And then the state contest is held in Nashville in the legislative complex near the state capitol. If you think you have students who are coming to the contest, go ahead and register yourself. It's easier to take you out than it is to add you back in after the deadline. And putting yourself in the system ensures that you get communications from me and from the regional coordinator. Because what I do is in August, I take all my teachers from last year, I take all the teachers who came to the workshops, I take all the teachers who've emailed me and said I'm interested in it, and I create an email distribution list and I email you all. After the teacher registration deadline closes, I look at that list, I look at my list of people who've registered, and I take you out because you don't need to get emails from me if you're not coming to the contest. Because all the emails from me are going to be, this is what you need to do for the contest. And the registration is going to be the same as it was last year, so hopefully that was fairly painless. What I would recommend doing is if you have a group of 5 students who've done a documentary, that they sit down together at school at the same computer and do it together. And that you upload your documentary from a desktop computer that is wired into the system. Don't do it from Panera where the signal is only one little bar. All right, so in East Tennessee, our coordinator is Lisa Oakley at the East Tennessee Historical Society. Your contest date is Friday, March 2nd at the University of Tennessee Conference Center. In North Middle Tennessee, as I said, we're moving to Tennessee State University in Nashville. The coordinator is going to be Eric Schmeller. In Middle Tennessee, the coordinator is Andy Polk. The contest is Friday, February 23rd, and it's at MTSU in Murfreesboro. Okay, so as I said before, the paper category is its own thing, its own animal. All of the other categories must be accompanied by a process paper and an annotated bibliography. The process paper is limited to 500 words, and it answers the questions: how did I pick my topic? How did I go about creating my project? How does my project relate to the theme? It can be informal in tone in that it's in first person, but it should be well written. It is the story of how the students did their project. The annotated bibliography is divided into primary sources and secondary sources, and each annotation for each citation needs to explain how the source was used to build the project. And judges can tell when bibliographies are padded, so you don't want to. If you're doing a project on Lewis Hine, it might be very, very tempting to cite every single one of those photographs individually. Do not do that. Cite the collection of photographs. That's one citation, okay? You don't get to do every single one of them. And then also, I see a lot of times when the students have used a photograph and then the annotation is, I used this photograph to create my costume. I used this photograph to create my costume. I used this photograph to create my costume. Okay, Tabitha's shaking her head. No, don't do that. No, we used this portrait of Anne Dallas Dudley to create the costume for that character. The more specific you are, the better off you are with the bibliographies. Now, in the rule book, it says you need to use Turabian or APA style. I was an English teacher. We used MLA in my classroom. I'm not going to be mad at you if you use MLA, if that's what you've been using or if that's what your school uses. Be consistent. Don't have an annotation, don't have a citation where it's core, comma, Jennifer C, and then your next one is J period, C period, core period. I will notice that, judges will notice that, okay? Because one of those is MLA style and one of those is APA style. So don't do that. There are tools, again, I didn't put this in your packet because I didn't want to overwhelm you, but as a History Day teacher, you have free access to Noodle tools, which is kind of you can use it in your classroom as kind of cloud storage for research projects and for sources. And it helps you, guide you through formatting bibliographies in whatever style you pick. There are some programs where you can put all your citations in and then you can have a little drop-down menu that says format bibliography APA style, format bibliography MLA style, okay? So the rule book does say Turabian or APA style. But again, I have never seen a judge at any level of competition object to a well-done, consistent bibliography that's in MLA style. This is what judges look at first before they actually look at the exhibit or the documentary or the performance. They keep a copy of this to assist them in their judging after the fact. So, you might have 6 projects that you're looking at. As a judge, you keep a hold of a process paper and bibliography from each one, and then when you sit down to lunch with your other judges, you pull these bibliographies and process papers out and you say, this kid turned in 1 page of URLs for a bibliography. This is not a medalist. This student's bibliography is 35 pages long, and everything is nicely organized and alphabetized, and this student understands the difference between a primary source and a secondary source. We're putting this in the pile of possibly a medalist. Documentary and exhibit are the most popular. I would say in North Middle Tennessee, exhibit is the most popular. We see fewer performances at the middle school level, fewer individual performances, I should say. We see a lot of group performances at the middle school level, not a lot of individual performances. And then at the high school level, we see a lot of individual performances and not a lot of group performances. I think that's just kids in high school get too busy. They can't make it work so they can actually meet together to practice, so it's easier for them to compete individually. The project should have a clear thesis that relates to this year's theme of conflict and compromise. And you don't need to be shy about it. You need to come and hit me over the head in the process paper, in the title, in the thesis, making that connection to the theme. All right, so the judging process, the students have between 10 and 20 minutes to meet with the judges. I do all of the judging instructions, and my #1 rule for judges is to be kind. Has anybody ever been a judge at a History Day contest? Okay, well, it's a neat experience. Hopefully the students will come out of the interviewing process feeling like they've been respected and treated like they're experts on their particular subject that they've chosen. But you can still practice for this and reassure them that they are being judged on the project. They're not being judged on how well they're dressed or how articulate they are. It's not an elocution contest. It's not a popularity contest. It is a how well did you do this research as reflected in this bibliography contest. Okay, so I just want to touch on this briefly, but we've talked about what History Day can do for students. What can History Day do for you as an educator? Jenny, did you notice any change in your teaching once you implemented History Day?
I guess you get to be more personal with your students, definitely with their different groups and what they wanted, because you had to, with that, I had to meet the students where they were at with their projects and personalities. Like I had one group that liked to goof off a lot, and then I was like, okay, no, and I had to make one student like, okay, you're going to be the leader of your group, and then with that, and they actually started, as the contest got closer, I seen that group that goofed off really put into hightail, like, oh, we got to get this done. The activities and stuff like that, it was just different because I had some that did Gandhi all the way up to some, they did a more newer person. I'm trying to think, Malala, they liked her. And so it was just figuring out what worked and what they liked, but going to different places, finding the research, everything was, they just felt more motivated as they got closer.
Tabitha, do you notice, how did it affect your teaching doing History Day?
I think it's a lot more independent. The kids are having to drive themselves a little more. The kids who go above and beyond what we do in the classroom are the ones that are more successful. I know that. I also think because of what I teach, I'm not one specific subject area, and the kids can pick an area that interests them. That's what I tell them. You're going to be working on this for 7-8 months. Pick something that you're going to like working with for 7-8 months. So the kid that interested in science usually picks a science topic. The kids that are interested in music may pick a music. I mean, it's a lot more personalized for the students.
Yeah, that's a good point. A couple of years ago, I had a mother say to me at the airport, I'm so glad I'm going to get my dining room back from Jonas Salk, because her daughter had done an exhibit and everything had been spread out on this table for 9 months now. So there has to be enough meat there to keep them occupied. You know, there has to be enough resources there for them to really dig into. But as teachers, I mean, a lot of teachers have said to me, you know, now I know everything there is to know about Joan of Arc. Now I know I'm not going to do Joan of Arc because there's not enough primary sources on her. So those are some things that you're not really going to find out until you've gone through the process.
And every year someone thinks they're going to do a certain topic and then they realize, they change the topic.
Yeah.
Every year there's the kid, you change topics.
Yeah.
I guarantee it.
Yeah.
There's my girls again.
There they are. Here are our the Perfect 36th, the 19th Amendment, and as you can see, their background was the amendment itself that they projected onto a sheet or piece of muslin, piece of canvas, and that was their only backdrop, and it worked very effectively because what they would do then is, so the three of them portrayed different characters. They would duck behind it and then they would do a quick change of their costumes and come back out while the other two were performing. Here's an example of an exhibit. This was an exhibit on the Navajo Code Talkers. And every year, each state is allowed to select an exhibit that is then displayed at the National Museum of American History. So I always ask the senior group exhibit to do it because it's a very long day. And I want to pick kids who are old enough so that if they wander off, I'm not worried about them. So there's some photos from a couple years ago then. All right, who has questions about any of this?
Did you say from 25 years or older?
25 years or older, so actually Malala is not a good choice.
Once you said that, I thought that.
Learned, they found a lot, but
She's
it
not
like,
even 25.
Yeah, she's only like 19 years old.
when we did it, and I told them they wouldn't place, but they were so interested in what she did that they actually stayed motivated through the whole process.
Okay.
Even though they knew they weren't going to place, they did an amazing project, and the judges literally said if it would have been older, they probably would have moved on.
Yeah, so sometimes you have to make bargains with kids. If you have a set of kids and the only way they're going to do it is if they get to do Malala, then you're just honest with them and you say, okay, you know, this is not really according to the guidelines, but they still learned a lot. Was it a website?
No, they did a board.
An exhibit? Okay.
And they were able to really talk to the details of what she did. They learned a lot about her almost being killed and her being in the hospital. I mean, they just went deep into it, though.
Yeah, so if it were National Current Events Day, then they would have placed. Did you have a question, Angie?
Just what advice do you have for those teachers who are on a block schedule or like a 9-week? I think some of the history teachers teach 9 weeks and think a different group the same 9 week.
So the 9-week classes are usually like government or econ, and then the full semester is usually world history, U.S. history. So you can do it in a government or econ class. I think it would be hard to do it on a block schedule. But those teachers who have the students for the fall semester could definitely do a History Day project.
A couple of my kids actually placed at regionals, which was really awesome since it was their first year and my first year. But like, it's really tough because you are competing, but like doing it as a club is definitely a possibility.
Yeah. How long did you meet once?
A lot of my kids would come once a week for 2 hours every week, but then as we got closer to competition and they started to feel that, oh my goodness, we're not going to get done, I did open it up to 2 days a week, and then in the last push, we did like a Saturday, fun day where we ordered pizza and they all came for the day. And so like you kind of just maybe start with 1 day or 2 days, and then because giving them the time really helped.
Yeah. Did you have a question too?
Do you see successful projects that are really locally based?
Yes.
And like kind of Foxfire method with some oral history? I just wondered.
Yeah, and the two documentaries that we're going to look at after lunch are both local history topics. And in fact, since I work for the Tennessee Historical Society, we love it when you pick Tennessee history topics. And local history topics do well for several reasons. First of all, they do well at the regional and school level because the adults who are coming to judge are excited to see the students interested in their own past. They do well for that same reason at the state level. They do well at the national level because the judges might be from Montana or California and they say, oh, we've never heard of the Highlander Center. You know, wow, this is just amazing. Our eyes have been opened to this fascinating insight into history that we never crossed our minds before. So sometimes in the judging process, the very best thing for a student is if the judge happens to also be an expert in that topic, but sometimes it's also a terrible thing too, because the students get really excited, oh yes, finally somebody's doing something on the Nashville sit-ins, and you have confused all these people. Rosa Parks is not the same person as Diane Nash, you know, so, but yes, I would say about 1/4 of the topics that we take to National History Day are local history topics. But with local history topics, what you want to do, and what both of the documentaries that we're going to look at after lunch do, is connect it to national and international themes. All right, so there is a History Day theme. Again, this is worth 20% on the rubric. It changes every year. So we saw the documentary that was the theme Leadership and Legacy in History. Turning Points in History I liked that theme. Revolution, Reaction, Reform, that one was a little bit hard. Debate and Diplomacy was okay. It was a pretty decent theme. Last year was Taking a Stand in History. That was pretty good to do. And then this year is Conflict and Compromise in History. So at some point, when it comes to topic selection, you're going to want to make sure that the topic can be related to the theme. The theme changes every year. It is very broad, and this is where we see students miss out on points, especially at the middle school level. I've seen a lot of really beautiful projects. I've seen a lot of exhibits that are basically timelines. The documentary that we looked at earlier, one thing that the student could have done better is to have hit the theme more precisely and said, here is where Andrew Jackson showed leadership, here is where Andrew Jackson is criticized for something he did as a leader, and he has a mixed legacy to many people. She kind of left it open-ended at the end. Was he or was he not the people's president? I would have preferred it if she had actually come to a conclusion that related to the theme Leadership and Legacy in History. You should have the theme reflected in the title. It should be addressed in the process paper. The last required question that they need to answer is, how does my project relate to this year's theme? And they need to be able to answer that question verbally because it's going to come up in the interviews as well. Oftentimes the judges will start off with, how does your project relate to the theme? So how do we help them get their minds around what is conflict and compromise? What defines a conflict? What are the different types of conflict? Is it all military conflict? Are we just going to get projects on the Civil War and World War II this year? Or are there other conflicts that people sometimes have? What are the different parties to the conflict? Now, if you're teaching language arts too, you can get into the 4 classical conflicts. Person against person, person against self, person against nature, person against the supernatural. Okay? What is a compromise? Is a compromise more beneficial to one group than to another group? What happens if the compromise fails? Which came first? Was there first a compromise and it didn't prevent the conflict and then you had to have another compromise? Or do you have a conflict and then there's a compromise and everybody's happy? And then the question that one of our regional coordinators always asks about your topic, so what? Why is this important? So talking about local history topics, maybe there's a famous feud that everybody knows about that involves water rights. Is there enough there to spend 9 months of your life researching? And is there enough there to tie it to something larger? Are we looking at conflict between the state of California and the state of Colorado over water rights? I mean, that might have a little bit more importance than, you know, Mr. McCoy is mad at Mr. Hatfield.
Georgia and Tennessee.
Yes, Georgia and Tennessee. Georgia wants us to redraw our state lines so that they can get water out of the Tennessee River. Okay, so that is something where
That actually has national implications.
Yes, it does have national implications. However, it is something that's going on right now. So you would want to look in the past to see if there was a similar conflict maybe 100 years ago, and what sort of compromise was arrived at.
Historical mapping, though.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that the boundaries changed, and therefore.
Yeah.
And so there is a historical relevance to it.
Yeah, but I think because it's been in the news right now, that might be a good place to start with brainstorming. Because I get actually calls in my office about this. People want us to send them maps showing Georgia can take our water, and I say, no, I'm not going to do that. You can't have our water.
There's not really a compromise.
Yeah, there's no compromise. Okay. So it might be that when you're brainstorming about topics, either it's too recent, but maybe you could go back in the past and find a similar conflict, or it might be that there was no compromise. Now, when it comes to conflict and compromise, you don't have to divide the time or the research 50-50. You don't have to have 5 minutes of the documentary about the conflict and 5 minutes about the compromise. It might be 80-20. Or you might start off 20% on a compromise, 60% on a conflict, and 20% on another compromise, okay? But you do need to touch on both conflict and compromise in order to have a strong project. One thing I ask the students is, can you find a quote from the research that you can use in your title? And so one of the documentaries that we're going to look at after lunch, the title is Roughin' the Bunch, and that is something that comes directly from an oral history interview. Now, as a judge or as somebody looking at it, to me the title is like a handshake. It tells me if I'm going to be interested in this or not. Is the title Rosa Parks? Well, I've seen a lot of projects on Rosa Parks. I think I know everything there is to know about Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks taking a stand in history. Okay, well now the student has acknowledged that there is a theme that the project needs to be connected to, but I'm still kind of bored. Rosa Parks, sitting down to take a stand. All right, that's a little bit more clever. Now we're finally getting somewhere with Rosa Parks. I have a person that I can attach this to. The best titles are going to give you context for the project, give you a person, a place, and a time. All right, you will get a hard copy of the theme book. It contains lesson plans. It has brainstorming lists for world history, European history topics. It has the theme analysis in it, and then it's like 60-some pages long. There's a lot of stuff in there for you. All right, and then this is the theme sheet that is 3 pages long. You have a graphic organizer. I gave you a hard copy as well, and it is keyed for this year. It asks the students to identify the little c context. So if you have a local history topic, the Elizabethton textile mill strike might be the small context. The larger context might be the aftermath of the Industrial Revolution, or the continuation of the Industrial Revolution and the moving of textile mills from the north to the south. Conflict between the workers and management over fair working environment. Compromise. Was there a compromise? Well, there was a strike. That's actually more conflict, right? Did it lead to any kind of compromise? And then short-term and long-term change. Short-term change, a lot of people went out on strike and didn't get their jobs back. Long-term change, there was a Fair Labor Standards Act adopted. Okay, so if you can answer all of these questions about the topic, then you probably have something with enough meat on it that you can spend 9 months analyzing. So I wanted to look at some of the titles. These are the projects that we took to National History Day last year, or last month actually. So still standing, again, the theme was taking a stand in history. Still standing, Rex Ritchie and the fight against bootlegging in Tennessee. Now, I don't know who Rex Ritchie is. This is a pretty local topic, right? But I know it takes place in Tennessee, and I know it has something to do with bootlegging, so presumably this is during Prohibition. Now, I've got a clue that this is going to be about prohibition and probably somebody in law enforcement who is trying to crack down on illegal alcohol. Sons of Liberty. Which Son of Liberty? Give me a clue. This is not taking me anywhere as a title. Look at some of the others. Branch Rickey. Who's Branch Rickey?
Owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers.
That's right. So he was, I think he was the manager when Jackie Robinson integrated baseball, okay? So a much better title would have been Branch Rickey, Jackie Robinson and the integration of baseball. Because now I know that's somebody who has, now I've got a time and a person that are somewhat familiar to me. Developing from the negatives, the photos that ended child labor in America. Now I think that's actually a pretty good title because it gives me a genre that I'm dealing with. And child labor, I guess I'm kind of like in my mind, all right, so that's probably around the Progressive Era, probably around the turn of the 18th to the 19th century. There's enough there to give me clues as to what I'm going to be looking at. All of our paper titles are very good this year. Taking a Stand for Humanitarian Intervention, the History of Iraq's Kurds, Realism, and the Changing Role of the United Nations. Now, I know this is probably going to take place over a long period of time, right? Because it's talking about the changing role of the United Nations, which has been around for a while. Thy Will Be Done, Clergy, Napalm, and the War in Vietnam. This is a more specific time period. This is Vietnam. And then the Battle of Karama, Taking a Stand that Transforms a People and Builds a Movement. This is one particular battle. So you can do that with your History Day project. You can look at one day, or you can look at the 100 Years' War. King's Mountain, Taking a Stand Against the British. When One Monk Stood. What is that about? It's actually a very good project. When One Monk Stood. Martin Luther. That was about Martin Luther. And then the Clinton 12, Taking a Stand for Integration. That's a pretty good title if you're from Tennessee because it's talking about Clinton and Anderson County. They maybe could have added the Clinton 12, Taking a Stand for Integration in East Tennessee to it so that a judge from Montana would know which Clinton they were talking about. They Were Men, King and the Sanitation Workers of Memphis. That's a pretty good title. Because it tells me I'm not just going to be looking at Martin Luther King, I'm also going to be looking at the people who were already on the ground in Memphis. Okay, if we want to take a 15-minute break, when we come back, Kira will introduce us to the Library of Congress.